Before the sun rises above the eastern horizon, the land along the Nile rests in a brief moment of quiet. The air is cool, carrying the faint scent of wet earth from the riverbanks and distant fields. You stand inside a modest Egyptian home, long before the village outside begins to stir. In this fragile window between night and day, the world feels suspended in silence. The house around you is simple, built from mud bricks shaped by human hands and dried under the relentless Egyptian sun. These bricks, made from a mixture of Nile mud, straw, and water, form thick walls designed to keep the interior cooler than the desert air outside. Their surfaces are rough but strong, stacked carefully to create a shelter that protects the family from heat, wind, and the occasional flood. The ceiling above is supported by wooden beams laid across the walls, covered with reeds and packed clay. Through small openings near the roof, faint traces of pale blue morning light begin to slip inside. Dust particles float slowly through the air, illuminated by the earliest hint of dawn. Inside the house, the space is organized with quiet practicality. Nothing here is extravagant, yet everything has its place. Along one wall stand several clay jars filled with water collected from the Nile the previous day. There, rounded forms cast soft shadows against the mud brick walls. Near them sit woven baskets made from palm fibers, filled with barley and emmer wheat, the grain that sustains daily life in ancient Egypt. Closer to the center of the room lie reed mats spread carefully across the floor. These serve as beds for the family during the night. On them rest the sleeping figures of the carpenter's wife and children, wrapped loosely in simple linen cloth. The mats are thin but practical, easy to roll up during the day to create space for work and movement inside the home. Against another wall, several tools are stored with care. A wooden mallet rests beside bronze chisels and a handsaw. Though the workshop stands outside the house, some tools remain indoors overnight, protected from moisture and theft. Each tool carries the marks of long use, small scratches, polished handles, edges sharpened countless times. Then, in the stillness before sunrise, the carpenter awakens. He rises slowly from his mat, careful not to disturb the sleeping family beside him. His body moves with the quiet discipline of someone accustomed to early mornings. Years of shaping would have strengthened his arms and shoulders, and the work of many seasons has etched faint lines across his hands. For craftsmen in ancient Egypt, the day always begins before the sun climbs above the desert horizon. The cooler hours of morning are precious, allowing work to begin before the intense heat arrives. The carpenter sits for a moment in silence, listening. Outside, the village remains mostly quiet, but subtle signs of life are beginning to appear. Somewhere in the distance, a rooster calls. A donkey shifts its weight near a stable wall. Soft footsteps pass along the narrow path outside as an early farmer heads toward the fields. The carpenter reaches for a clay jar and pours a small amount of water into a simple cup. The cool liquid helps clear the last traces of sleep. He washes his hands briefly, then wraps a light linen garment around his body, tying it securely at the waist. Near the doorway, the faint glow of the morning sky is becoming brighter. The darkness that once filled the house begins to fade, replaced by the pale gold of the rising sun. Outside, the village awakens. The first cooking fires begin to crackle as women prepare bread for the day ahead. The scent of grain and smoke drifts gently through the morning air. A child laughs somewhere nearby, chasing another through the dusty street. Life along the Nile is beginning again. The carpenter pauses at the doorway of his home and looks back at the quiet room behind him. The sleeping mats, the baskets of grain, the jars of water that sustain the household. This humble space is not only where his family rests. It is the center of daily survival. Beyond the doorway waits another long day of labor, tools, and wood waiting to be shaped by steady hands. But before we follow him into the world outside, take a moment to imagine what it truly meant to live here, inside a mud brick house on the banks of the Nile. Thousands of years ago, stepping outside the mud brick house, you immediately feel the cool morning air brushing across the village as the first real light of day spreads along the Nile Valley. Just a few steps from the entrance of the home stands the carpenter's workshop. It is not a large structure, nor is it enclosed like the house itself. Instead, it is a shaded working space built with simple wooden posts that support a light covering of reeds and woven mats. The roof filters the rising sunlight, creating shifting patterns of gold and shadow across the packed earth floor. This small area is where the real work of the household begins. Here, every object around you reflects patience, skill, and years of learned knowledge. Along one wall, tools are arranged carefully in a way that might seem modest to modern eyes. Yet each tool represents the essential technology of ancient Egyptian craftsmanship. These instruments are not decorative. They are extensions of the carpenter's hands. Resting against the wall is a wooden mallet, its surface worn smooth by years of striking chisels and shaping timber. Nearby lies a bronze chisel, one of the most important tools in the workshop. The metal edge catches the morning light as the carpenter lifts it, running his thumb gently along the blade to test its sharpness. Bronze, though softer than modern steel, was a valuable material in ancient Egypt, and tools made from it required careful maintenance. Beside the chisel sits a handsaw with a serrated metal edge, used to cut boards into precise shapes. Its teeth are small but effective, capable of slicing through the limited supply of timber available in this desert land. Next to it rests a bow drill, an ingenious tool used for drilling holes in wood. The drill works through a simple but clever design, a wooden shaft spun rapidly by a bowstring, creating enough friction to pierce even dense wood. Every tool has its place, and every movement in this workshop follows a rhythm refined over many years. Wood itself is a rare and precious material in Egypt. Unlike lands covered in forests, the Egyptian landscape offers very little timber. The few trees that grow naturally along the Nile, such as acacia or sycamore fig, provide small amounts of workable wood, but they are rarely large enough for major construction. Because of this scarcity, the most valued wood arrives from distant lands. Traders bring cedar, logs from the mountains of Lebanon across the Mediterranean, transporting them by ship to Egyptian ports before they travel inland along the Nile. Cedar is prized not only for its strength but also for its resistance to insects and decay. The carpenter selects a narrow plank of cedar and places it on a low wooden workbench. Even the bench itself bears marks from years of cutting and carving. With steady hands, he begins to work. You hear the first sharp strike of the mallet against the bronze chisel. Tap, tap, tap. The sound carries softly through the quiet village morning. Each strike removes a thin curl of wood, slowly shaping the board into the desired form. This is not rushed labor. Egyptian carpentry depends on patience, precision, and an intimate understanding of how wood behaves under pressure. The carpenter pauses occasionally, measuring with his eyes and hands rather than rulers or markings. In a world without modern machines, accuracy comes from experience. A slight tilt of the chisel changes the entire direction of the cut. Nearby, another piece of wood waits to be shaped into part of a small stool. Furniture like this may seem ordinary, but in ancient Egypt it holds real value. Chairs, chests, beds, and storage boxes are crafted almost entirely by skilled carpenters like this one. Some pieces are meant for everyday households. Others may eventually find their way into temples or the homes of wealthy officials. In rare cases, the work of a carpenter might even become part of a burial chamber prepared for the afterlife. But today, the work is simpler. The carpenter grips the handsaw and begins to cut through the cedar plank. The blade moves back and forth in steady motion, sending a fine line of sawdust drifting toward the ground. Slowly, the board separates cleanly, ready to become part of a larger object. This is the labor that sustains the family sleeping inside the mud brick house. The baskets of grain, the jars of water, the reed mats on the floor, all of it depends on work like this. In ancient Egyptian society, skilled craftsmen are deeply respected. Though they may not hold the power of priests or nobles, their work supports the structures of everyday life. Without carpenters, there would be no furniture, no boats along the Nile, no doors for homes or temples. Even the grand monuments of the Pharaohs rely on tools, scaffolding, and wooden frameworks built by hands like these. The carpenter pauses again, wiping sweat from his brow as the sun climbs higher in the sky. The shaded roof of the workshop protects him for now, but the desert heat will soon grow stronger. Still, the work continues. Each movement of the chisel, each careful cut of the saw, is another step in shaping the objects that will fill homes, serve families, and sometimes travel far beyond this quiet village. As the sun climbs higher above the Nile Valley, the light outside grows stronger and the air begins to warm. You step back inside the carpenter's home, leaving behind the steady rhythm of chisels and saws in the workshop. Inside, the atmosphere feels different. The mud brick walls soften the heat, and the room carries the comforting smells of grain, smoke, and baked bread. This space is not only shelter, it is the center of the family's daily life. Near the back of the house, the carpenter's wife is already working beside a small clay oven built directly into the floor. The oven is shaped like a rounded dome, made from packed mud and straw, hardened by many fires. Its darkened surface shows years of use, each layer of soot telling the quiet story of countless meals prepared inside this home. You watch as she kneels beside a flat, grinding stone placed on the ground. In front of her lies a small pile of grain harvested from fields, nourished by the annual floods of the Nile. With steady movements, she pushes a smooth stone back and forth across the surface, crushing the grain into coarse flour. The sound of grinding stone against stone fills the room with a soft, repetitive rhythm. Bread is the foundation of life in ancient Egypt. It feeds farmers, craftsmen, laborers, and even the officials who govern the land. The flour she prepares will soon become the flat loaves that sustain the entire household. She mixes the ground grain with water in a simple clay bowl, kneading the mixture into a rough dough. Her hands move with practiced efficiency, shaping the dough into small, rounded portions before pressing them flat. One by one, The loaves are placed inside the clay oven where the heat of burning reeds and dry straw quickly begins to bake them. The smell of warm bread slowly spreads through the room. Nearby, small baskets hold other foods that complete the family's meal. A cluster of onions rests in one corner, their sharp scent mixing with the aroma of baking grain. On a clay dish lies a small fish caught earlier from the Nile, its silver scales reflecting the light that filters through the doorway. Beside it are several dates, dark and sweet, gathered from palm trees that grow along the fertile riverbanks. These foods may seem simple, but together they form the heart of the Egyptian diet. Bread, onions, fish, and fruit provide enough nourishment for families who spend long days working under the sun. As the bread continues to bake, the children begin to stir from their reed mats. One by one they sit up, rubbing sleep from their eyes. The room fills with quiet, voices and soft footsteps across the packed earth floor. One of the children wanders toward the doorway where the workshop stands outside. Through the open entrance, the rhythmic tapping of the carpenter's tools can still be heard. Curious eyes watch their father at work as he shapes wood beneath the shade of the workshop roof. In ancient Egyptian families, children learn not through written lessons but through observation and experience. Skills pass naturally from parent to child, woven into the rhythm of daily life. The boy studies the tools carefully, the mallet, the chisel, the saw. He watches how each movement of the carpenter's hands transforms rough wood into something useful. Perhaps one day those same tools will rest in his hands. For now, learning begins simply by watching. Back inside the house, the mother removes the finished bread from the oven. The loaves are slightly rough in shape, but golden on their surface. She places them into a woven basket and begins to prepare the rest of the meal. Soon the carpenter enters the house, wiping the dust of wood shavings from his hands. The smell of food greets him immediately. After hours of work, this moment offers a brief pause in the long cycle of the day. The family gathers together on the reed mats. The meal is shared without ceremony, yet it carries deep meaning. Bread is broken and passed from hand to hand. Pieces of fish are divided carefully so that everyone receives a portion. The onions add sharp flavor, while the dates bring sweetness to the end of the meal. There are no elaborate tables or fine plates here. The simplicity of the meal reflects the practical nature of life along the Nile. Yet within this modest setting, a sense of order and purpose fills the home. Every object inside the house has a role. Every person contributes to the survival of the family. The carpenter's work shapes wood. The mother prepares food and manages the home. The children observe, learn, and slowly grow into the responsibilities that await them. Outside, the sounds of the village continue to grow stronger. Farmers pass along the dusty paths. Animals move between small enclosures, and distant voices echo across the morning air. Life in ancient Egypt is rarely quiet for long. Soon the carpenter will return to his workshop, and the rhythm of tool striking will begin again. But for this moment, inside the cool shelter of mud brick walls, the family shares a brief pause together. As the afternoon sun begins its slow descent toward the western desert, the carpenter returns once again to the shaded workshop beside his home. The light now falls differently across the village, warmer and heavier, casting long shadows across the packed earth. The sounds of the day continue around you, distant voices, animals shifting in their enclosures. The rustling of reeds along the riverbanks, But here in the workshop, the steady rhythm of craft still defines the moment. You watch as the carpenter studies the piece of wood resting on the low workbench. It is the same cedar plank he began shaping earlier in the morning. And now its form is beginning to emerge, with greater clarity. The rough board has slowly transformed into the frame of a wooden chest, its edges smoothed by careful carving. The scent of freshly cut cedar drifts softly through the air. This simple object may seem small compared to the massive stone monuments that dominate the Egyptian landscape. But it belongs to a long tradition of craftsmanship that quietly supports the entire civilization. Carpenters in ancient Egypt build far more than household furniture. Their work appears everywhere in daily life. The stools and beds inside homes, the storage chests that protect grain and clothing, the small wooden tables used for food preparation, all of these are shaped by the hands of craftsmen like this one. Yet, the role of carpentry reaches far beyond the walls of ordinary houses. Along the banks of the Nile, wooden boats carry people and goods across the river that sustains Egyptian life. These vessels, some small and others large enough to transport stone blocks or grain shipments, rely on carefully constructed wooden frames sealed with rope and resin. Without carpenters, the Nile itself would be far more difficult to navigate. In the cities and sacred complexes of Egypt, carpenters also create the great wooden doors that guard temple entrances. These doors, sometimes decorated with intricate carvings or metal fittings, separate the ordinary world from spaces believed to be inhabited by the gods. But perhaps the most profound work of Egyptian carpenters lies within the realm of death and the afterlife. In a culture that views death not as an end but as a transition into another world, the objects prepared for burial carry deep spiritual importance. Wudansai, carefully crafted coffins designed to protect the body, are among the most significant creations of skilled carpenters. Some of these coffins are simple, made for ordinary people. Others are richly decorated with painted symbols, inscriptions, and protective imagery meant to guide the soul safely into eternity. In workshops across Egypt, craftsmen shape these objects with extraordinary care, knowing that their work may accompany someone on the journey beyond life itself. Back in the village workshop, the carpenter continues refining the chest before him. With a chisel held firmly in place, he taps the wooden mallet gently, smoothing the final edges of the lid. Each movement is slow and deliberate, the result of years spent mastering this craft. The sun sinks lower toward the horizon, and the golden light of evening begins to fill the valley. The heat of the day fades gradually, replaced by a softer breeze drifting from the river. At last, the carpenter pauses and runs his hand across the surface of the finished wood. The chest is complete. It may one day hold grain, clothing, or perhaps tools that belong to another generation. He sets down the mallet and carefully returns each tool to its place along the wall. Even after a long day of labor, the workshop remains orderly. In a world where tools are precious, every object must be preserved for the work that awaits tomorrow. Outside, the village begins to quiet as the sun disappears beyond the western desert, the land Egyptians associate with the realm of the dead. The sky fades from gold to deep blue as the first stars appear above the Nile. Inside the house, the family gathers once again on the reed mats. The evening meal is simple, and the flickering light of a small oil lamp casts warm shadows across the mud brick walls. After the long hours of work, This quiet moment together feels almost sacred. You sit within this humble space and realize something remarkable. The carpenter's life may seem modest compared to the grandeur of pharaohs, temples, and pyramids. Yet the work performed here is woven into the foundation of that great civilization. Every boat crossing the Nile, every door protecting a temple, every chest, stool, or coffin placed within a tomb. All begin in workshops like this one. The legacy of ancient Egypt is often told through its monuments of stone. But behind those monuments stand generations of craftsmen whose names were never recorded. Their tools shaped wood, their hands refined materials, and their quiet dedication allowed the culture of the Nile to endure for thousands of years. And now, as the night settles over the village and the carpenter's home grows silent once more, you have stepped inside a small part of that forgotten world.